it took a lot for her to accept that she needs help. I think that, again, sometimes the wrong you see in someone is something that you want to rectify in your life, right? That feeling that my kids can only eat my food. She had to let go.
Hello, listeners. My name is Mridvika, and this is Just an Ordinary Mom podcast. I really am just an ordinary mom to twin boys with a high-speed career, and this podcast is to tell the stories of ordinary moms doing extraordinary things. On the show today, I speak to Gayatri Nair Lobo, who's the Chief Operating Officer at A.T. Chandra Foundation. I'm really excited to interview Gayatri, who was my former boss and is now a really close friend. There's also some cosmic and deeper connection since I had my twin boys after spending almost all of my working hours playing with her twin boys until I had mine 2 years later. Gayatri's experience of over 2 decades spans across strategy consulting, non-profit fundraising, scaling impact interventions within organizations, working in the areas of access to education, school leadership, and farmer livelihoods. She has raised her twin boys to be fair, just, and empathetic, who now correct her when some of her inherent biases come to the fore. She talks about the importance of ceding control as a mother, gives tips on overcoming impostor syndrome, and distributing the boring menial tasks of running a household with one's life partner. Welcome, Gayatri.
Thanks, Mridvika.
Gayatri, tell me a little bit about your growing up years. What did your parents do? What were some of your hobbies like? And how did those early years shape you as an individual?
So I'm a through and through Bombay girl. Grew up in Bandra, Khar. Both my parents were working professionals. And actually, in my early years as a child, both were setting up their own businesses, practices. My dad is a management consultant and was traveling a lot when we were kids, trying to set up, get new clients, deliver on projects. And my mom was a lawyer. My mother actually did her law between getting pregnant with my brother and my birth.
Oh, wow.
So she also started working when I started school because I was out of the house, so she could start. So I think made both me and my brother extremely independent, but yet felt completely nourished and loved in our home environment.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about your mom. I know she's been one of the biggest influences on you. What prompted her to do law, between you and your brother? Was it inspiration from someone in the family?
So interestingly, my mom was the original feminist in my life, but interestingly, she did law for the most non-feminist reason. My dad decided to do law, and just so she could spend time with him, she also signed up. My dad did it for 2 years. My mom was the kind of person who, if she started something, she'd finish it and she'd finish it well. So she said, I'm really enjoying law now. Now I will finish my degree and then I will start practicing law. And so it was just, I think it was sometimes your fate is written for you, right? That's how it was for her. And in her journey, setting up her own practice, I think I saw, like I was saying, she was the original feminist. So I saw a lot of ways in which she'd tackle masculinity around her to make herself a successful lawyer.
Yeah, I'm sure being a lawyer in a male-dominated profession would have been tough in those times. Do you recall any stories or any moments where she came and described to you like how she actually got her way through in that world?
Yeah. So you rightly said in the early 80s, 90s, there weren't that many female lawyers. And the belief people had was if you're a lawyer and you're a woman, you should be doing divorce cases, right? And my mom's interest was in corporate law. So to actually break that stereotype, convince clients that, she's going to be just as capable as the next man was tough. She used to joke that her name was Mohana. So many people would think her name is Mohan and therefore, agree to even speak with her. But she was also introverted. So it took an extra effort to put yourself out there. And, one of the things you see, the difference between men and women is a woman will tell you, I've done A, B, and C. A man will say, I've done A, B, and C. And the implication of that is that it's going to change the world. That was something I don't think my mom ever mastered. But I think if she had, she would have done even more with herself.
Yeah, how did she and other women influences in your life shape the view of what women's place in society should look like for you? You were the second of the 2 siblings. So yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
I think, like I said, my mom was a huge influence. From our early years, roles at home were very balanced because of that. Of course, because of my dad also. So the other influences I would say were my 2 grandmothers, extremely different from each other. One really taught me kindness and empathy and how to be a better person. And the other one taught me how cool it is to be confident. I can, think of your grandmother's age. My grandmother passed away last year at 94.
Wow.
She had the heartiest laugh. Like while she was growing up, she was told that, oh, you have to be demure and you have to be, coy. And she had the heartiest laugh. She had the most friends. She was out every single day. And I think it taught me that you can be all these three things. Like you can take the best from all these three persons and make who you are. I'm not saying I'm anywhere near any one of them, but I think all of that has shaped who I am. And confidence, the belief that you can stand up for what you want. From my mother, I learned just this whole feeling of, necessity for social justice. So I think like huge influences on my life.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had a very balanced household when it came to sharing responsibilities. I think it was very progressive of your parents for the times that they were raising you both. Tell me a little bit about how did, that play out? Like, obviously, the gender didn't play out the way it does in most of the families. So how were the chores distributed? How did you create this worldview of what a balanced relationship in a marriage looks like?
Yeah. I don't know if they had any conversation early on who does what, but I'll tell you what I saw, right? My mom took care of the home and my dad took care of buying vegetables, buying fish. Like every Sunday, it was his job. 2 hours, he'd be out in the market. My mother hated that, so she never went. Dad would know which fisherwoman's daughter is going to college, which son is getting married. He'd spend half an hour with the medical store guy. So he knew all of them. He had friends there. My mom ensured the house was spick and span. So early on, she used to come back home after work, start cooking. Then we'd have dinner, go to bed. And my dad at one point told us, saying, why are you doing this? Why can't we just hire a cook? She hated cooking, by the way. But she was an amazing cook. He said, we love your food, but we can't see what's happening to you, right? It's exhausting. And you're grumpy and this is not who you are. It took a lot for her to accept that she needs help. I think that, again, sometimes the wrong you see in someone is something that you want to rectify in your life, right? That feeling that my kids can only eat my food. She had to let go. And I think that again freed her up to spend more time with us, to spend more time on her career. She's not rushing home so that we have dinner at the right time. And so the chores just automatically balance themselves out. Like school, if I left something at home and I called home, my mother would say, please tell your teacher, I'm also a working professional. I cannot come and give it to you.
Wow, amazing.
It should have taught me to be more responsible. I still made that mistake multiple times. Or parent-teaching meetings. It would be my dad who came, which I dreaded. But my mother would say, I can't tell the judge, please postpone this case because my daughter has a parent-teacher meeting in school. Right? So it was just understood that this is how it's going to be. And there was never, this is not a man's job or this is not a woman's job.
That's fantastic. And kudos to your family to lay that example that's shaped you and your relationship with your spouse. I want to shift gears and I want to hear a little bit about your career, how it shaped up, what were some of the courses you took in undergrad before we jump into your professional life.
Sure. I was a very lazy kid.
I don't agree, but
kid,
sure.
I said kid. Changed later on. I think I'd put in the least effort because I did decently. Right? I think if I'd worked harder, things would have been, at least on the academic side, different. I think professionally, I've still managed to do well because I stopped being lazy. So I went down the usual road, did a BCom, MBA, Mumbai University, didn't have aspirations that, I must go to this Ivy League college. I was like, yeah, theek hai na. This is good enough for me. I don't know what changed in my professional life where I suddenly became ambitious. I suddenly wanted to be, top of the cohort. And I'm glad I did because that then led me to where I am today.
Yeah, you've been now working for 22 years and you were in consulting before you crossed over to the social and development sector. Tell me a little bit about how that change came about because you were doing really well in consulting life. What prompted that radical shift, to move from corporate to social space?
Yeah. First of all, when you said 22, it struck me like, okay, I'm old now.
It's a compliment.
Thank you. But, a lot of people without knowing me assume that I moved to the social sector because I had kids and it would be an easier life. It's actually, I think, harder in many ways. Work doesn't stop when you leave the office. So yes, I was doing pretty well in consulting. You can imagine what consulting salaries were like. And, I was telling you about my maternal grandmother. I think this need to give back or this feeling that I'm so privileged, I need to do something else, always stayed with me. My best friend and I, we once went to a school near our place to find out if we can volunteer on the weekends. And they said, boss, weekends, so we also shut. So that kind of lingered. And then Times of India came up with this Teach India program. So I signed up for that. And I knew that time that weekends are not going to work. So I signed up for a weekday. And because of that, I got a slot on a Monday afternoon to go and teach at a school near the office. Convinced my boss that work won't be affected. And I started doing that. I think, and Mridvika, you will know this, but the more you do on the social space, the less you feel you've actually made any impact.
Yeah.
Right? So I kept, my weekends would go on lesson planning and making charts, but I would come back saying, no, I still got more out of it than I gave the kids. And I think that really made me think about making a shift. Still didn't do anything about it. I happened to hear about Teach for India, meet with the founder, and then joined. Realized that, okay, I can do this for a year and come back to my consulting career, right? So I took a sabbatical. I think I remember about 5 years later, I wrote to them saying, listen, you can cancel my email ID. I'm not coming back. I think that safety net helped me make the shift.
Yeah.
Knowing that I can go back. But once you wet your feet, as they say, it's hard to then go back into that corporate life.
Yeah. So Gayatri, the organizations that you've been part of have been doing amazing work in their own respective areas, all the way from providing quality education to school leadership to now that you're part of, a family foundation that's working with farmers in rural setup. How have you continued to find meaning in different, types of social work that you've been part of? Talk to me a little bit about that.
It's actually really easy. Spend some time with the people whose lives you want to change, and you can't not find meaning. Like, you can't not find purpose. And this is what I'm saying about going back to the corporate sector. I can't, because I will not find purpose. Last week, I was in Rajgarh in MP. Now, these are places I'm going to that I could not find on a map earlier. And spend some time with the farmers there. And when they were talking about the hope that they see coming out of the work that they're doing, I had to turn my face away so they don't see me tearing up. And not tearing up because, I'm making such a big difference to this man's life, but just tearing up saying that something so basic is touching him. And I'm spending 2 days in this district. This guy has to continue living here. I'm complaining about not having enough toilets that I can go to during the day. This is their lives. And just by ensuring that there's, hopefully more water for them after the monsoons, he's talking about how his life is going to change. So that, it's very humbling. And I think that really helps find purpose.
Amazing. You've been a CEO in your previous role, and you currently are the CEO at A.T. Chandra Foundation. And you've risen through the ranks all these years. You've earned enough and more credibility in the sector and space. Has impostor syndrome ever played out for you? And if so, how have you tried to overcome the moments of self-doubt?
So yes, very often. And not just imposter syndrome, because like you said, right, I moved from an education background, working in the education sector, to now working on farmer livelihoods and distress. 2 things. So one is imposter syndrome itself. Like, I don't know the space. Everybody's going to know that I don't know the space, and they're only giving me bhav because I'm coming from the funder side.
Yeah.
But the other thing that also I think inhibits growth is this feeling that what is this next person thinking about me right now? And I think that is something that I've really made an effort to overcome. I get inspiration from the strangest places. So I was watching a television show where somebody said, and everybody's not going to like you, right? Everybody didn't like Mahatma Gandhi, that's why he got killed. And look at how amazing he was. So who are you to expect everyone to like you? And I think Netflix might have been my influence, but it stayed with me, right? I was like, every now and then I have to remind myself saying, it's okay if they don't like you. You be committed to the work you're trying to do and just put your head down and do that. If somebody thinks differently, that's fine. That's a different perspective. You're constantly going to be judged. If you also judge yourself, how will you move forward? I think that thought is something that helps me.
That's an amazing piece of advice, and I think I'm going to keep reflecting on it as well. Let's shift gears and talk a little bit about how motherhood journey has been like, and I think it's my favorite topic. Tell me a little bit about when you decided to embrace motherhood. So was this always on the plan, and did you have a conversation with your spouse who was equally invested in the idea?
I've always wanted kids, right? So anyone who ever planned to marry me would know that upfront. I'm going to have kids. I'm going to have 2 kids. Well, the hope was a boy and a girl, but that was always on the agenda. So thankfully, Savino also felt the same way. And I've seen how good he is with kids, his nieces and nephews. And we knew that kids are going to be a big part of who we are. But actually conceiving was really hard. And it strains your relationship. It makes the whole idea of having a child become like a process rather than such a, beautiful thing that people make it out to be. But thankfully we got there. I was told very early on that I'm going to have twins, which somehow I had an inkling I would, and then it happened. You know that story. So we knew it's going to be a hard journey, harder than we thought. But I think because we were so keen on having kids, we knew we'd just accept it as it is. And yeah, again, we didn't sit down and have a conversation about wanting kids, when we should have kids. I think it happened at the right time.
Yeah, and you have wonderful, very well-behaved boys, and they're just adorable.
Thank you.
You had a tough pregnancy. The kids were premature, and you came from a family of privilege. Your husband was doing very well for himself at work. If you wanted, you could have really and very comfortably taken the extended maternity break or not returned to work at all. What kept you going, Gayatri, and why did you choose to return within those 3 months?
I think it's who I am, right? I mean, you know that even through my maternity break, I didn't fully switch off. We had meetings at my place. I came to a board meeting. I remember having a whole conversation about a funder pulling out. So it was easy to come back to work in that sense. I think if I'd taken a full break, it would have been harder. Of course, I was terrified. I was terrified about missing the nursing schedule of my kids, of not being there when somebody is unwell. My mother-in-law was a huge help. My mom would finish work at Kolaba, travel to Mahim, and be with my kids till I came back home from work. My mother-in-law would be there the whole day with them. We had, like you said, privilege, right? So I could have nannies at home, but she would be there to make sure that they're not doing just what they wanted. And that gave me peace of mind to focus on work. I think had I stayed at home, and this is not to judge anybody who stays at home, but it's me, I would have gone stark crazy. I needed to see adults. I needed to talk something other than how many times somebody pooped and how many times I changed somebody else's nappy and are they nursing okay. I needed to have adult conversations about something other than myself and my kids. And I think had I stayed at home, I would have been not a happy person.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the support structure that you were fortunate to have, but I'm sure that it takes work at both ends to, create this nurturing environment from parents on both sides. What are some of the things that you had to give up, as a mother to cede control with whoever it was that was taking care of your kids when you were out at work?
Yeah, I think ceding control is the hardest thing as a mother. We have this belief that only we know what's best for our kids. When actually we're first-time mothers, like how on earth could we know everything that's perfect for our kids? But of course, we read books and we know the theory, and we want our kids to be brought up a certain way. Nothing wrong with that. I think for me, the tougher part were the grandfathers. Both grandmothers totally saw what we wanted, and the fact that I had twins, I needed them on a schedule. It was hard to get them on a schedule. I think they both accepted that I wanted to do things a certain way. I had a great pediatrician, so I could just blame everything on him, saying, no, but Dr. Cyrus has said to do this way. The maids or the nannies that we had very early on realized that I'm not going to take a different way of doing something. If the bottles have to be sterilized, they will be sterilized, right? So those kind of things. I had my things that I'm willing to give up on, and I had my absolutely no deviation from this separate list. Like I got judged a lot for sleep training my boys, but I didn't care. Like I had friends judge me. I had my both sets of grandfathers tell me that I'm being cruel and evil. But I think it has really helped in so many ways of actually making my kids more peaceful and making me a better mother.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think I can say that for myself that I somehow feel that, when I do things for kids, and I think I've been just socialized as a mother that I do it better than, the father. I always wanted to have control over everything related to them, right? So I distinctly remember you telling me when I had my own kids, that first thing was to let go of certain things and not try to be a superwoman at everything that I do. Why do you think it's important, Gayatri, for mothers to cede authority over some of the domestic chores and domestic sphere to their male partners, even if it means that it would be done differently or would be done less perfectly than they would like?
Just for your own sanity, like short answer, right? Just constantly managing how much they eat, what they eat, how they eat, what time they eat. And the longer scheme of things doesn't really matter. Yes, you don't want them having Lay's wafers for lunch.
Yeah.
Like I said, certain boundary conditions exist. But if they eat it half an hour later, they've had a full meal, it's okay, no?
Yeah.
Like I was like, if I go back to the example of my mother wanting to come back home and cook for us because she thought that only her cooking would be okay. We got a maid. Yes, her food was not as good as my mother's, but we lived. We got nutritious meals and, 43 layers I've survived on this planet having eaten that food. In the longer scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. So I think just thinking about 20 years from now, and then suddenly you realize that this thing that you're holding on to with such steadfast stubbornness really doesn't matter in the larger scheme of things.
Yeah, no, I remember. So for the listeners, Gayatri and I worked together. She was my boss. And I remember there was one time that I was obsessing over the kids eating Parle-G biscuits for a certain meal. And she very kindly said, look, Mridvika, if the kids are bathed, they are fed, they are not killing over each other, they'll live and they'll be fine. And I think I've kept that, as the most important piece of advice on my mind. If I want to have like this, support structure that is trying to good by the kids, in their own way. So thanks, Gayatri. I think I'll forever be grateful for that piece of advice to you.
I'll give you one more example. So when we pack for holidays, I pack, my husband comes, unpacks and repacks what he thinks is correct for the kids. Now I don't pack anymore. And it's like 20 minutes of my life is free. I'm like, anyway, you're going to unpack it. So you do it your way.
That's amazing. So, Gayatri, women can have it all was a phrase that Indra Nooyi challenged openly. I want to turn that same question to you and ask, do you think women can have it all?
I think it's the definition of all, right? For me, all is a balanced life, a happy life, and I think women can have it all. But if you're saying I need to be the best mother, the best working professional, the best wife, the best daughter-in-law, the best daughter, no, you can't have it all.
Yeah.
But you can be decent at all of it and just balance it out.
Yeah. It's hard for working mothers to reach their full potential in the profession, and then, especially if they have a second unpaid job that awaits for them at home. And much of it is repetitive and, thankless. And I know Savino, and I have seen him from close quarters, and I know that he participates enough to a large extent, if not equally, in shouldering whatever responsibilities that you have at home. How have you distributed chores tactically so that listeners can benefit from having, similar conversations with their partners?
Yeah. Again, it didn't come from a conversation. It just somehow happened this way. Savino's dad also does a lot in his house, right? So that obviously helps. You'll see him at home cutting salad for dinner and things like that. At home, again, he manages all the buying of groceries, vegetables, online, but whatever, it's his. Even the maid knows she has to go and tell Bhaiya and not me. All the kid-related stuff, by and large, I do. But now, work has gotten so hectic that Savino's just seamlessly taken over. He sets up the tennis lessons, after-school activities he manages. It's just I know when he gets really busy, I'll step in. So just touch wood, seamlessly flows that way. We have an amazing nanny at home. She's no longer the boy's nanny, she's my nanny. She manages what I should eat. I don't even have to tell her ki, can you make this for dinner? She doesn't call me at work saying, Didi, aaj dinner ke liye kya banao? She just decides. And I think that decision making taken off me is again a huge help. So I think 3 of us together run the house, and somehow chores have just been distributed. If I can openly admit this right now, I think I do the least in the house.
I should get Savino on the show and ask him to sort of give advice on how to seamlessly take over
the ordinary men's show, ordinary fathers.
Gayatri, life becomes busy sooner than you know, right? As a mother, how do you find time for yourself? What are some of the things that you try to do consciously and intentionally so that Gayatri is more than just a mother or a wife or a daughter or a daughter-in-law? How do you prioritize yourself?
It's gotten better now. I have to say, when the kids were younger and with work, there was no Gayatri. There was the professional and there was a mother and there was no me. It's gotten better with the kids being older, with them being more independent, making them do their own work. I can now focus on yoga in the mornings, or I go for a walk if I'm not doing yoga. That's my me time. When I come back from work, if I'm exhausted, the kids and I will just lie in my bed and read books. It's not conversation, it's relaxing, and it's beautiful because I have one head on my stomach, one's head on my feet, and it's just a nice moment and a nice, half an hour, 45 minutes that we spend. And I think that's enough. There are things I would want to do more of, maybe spend more time with my girlfriends, which we can unfortunately do only once every year sometimes. I would like to read more, I would like to sing more. Some things you just have to give up and figure out when you can do it rather than doing it all the time.
Gayatri, you're raising twin sons, and I can tell you from my own experience that as mothers, that's a huge responsibility, raising two boys in today's times. How do you have conversations around inclusion, diversity, equal distribution of work at home, respect, empathy, consent, and all these really important topics with your sons, which I don't think, parents of earlier generations had with their sons?
I mean, these are hugely important topics, right? So I just go ahead into it. If there's been some incident in the world, we talk about it. We haven't had a chance yet to talk about the shootings in the US, but we've talked about gun control on previous occasions. We've talked about consent, like you said. We've talked about changes that your body goes through. So I believe in answering every question of theirs honestly, but in a child-appropriate way. Like, I won't go overboard. They're 11 now. They're very curious. And I think they're extremely, they're actually too black and white sometimes. So I'm now working on this gray area, being okay with somebody thinking differently. Yesterday, I was talking about someone and I said, oh, she's a girly girl. And my son says, Mom, that's sexist.
Wow.
And I said, no, but it's not sexist. I'm not taking it in a bad way. He said, no, but what is girly girl? What does girly mean? What does that adjective mean? And I had to say, I'm sorry, my mistake. The descriptions I was giving, he's saying, why can't a boy do that? Yeah, my son bought pink chappals the other day. And I said, really? And he said, why? Do you have a problem with the boy wearing pink? And I had to say, no, please go ahead. So, they challenge me now more than the other way around.
That's amazing. Gayatri, what is that one piece of advice that you would give to another woman who wants to have a career while feeling like she's been a reasonably successful mother if she chooses to be one?
So this is something I've learned over the years. When you're being a mom, be a mom. When you're at work, be at work. Don't sit at work and feel guilty that you're not at home. Don't be at home and feel guilty that you're not, catering to something at work. Just 100% do what you're doing in that moment, and people will judge. Let them judge. You stop judging yourself.
That's a fantastic piece of advice, Gayatri, and I think I still get goosebumps when you say that out aloud, and I've heard that several times. And that, listeners, was the episode of Just an Ordinary Mom. Thank you so much to Gayatri Nair Lobo for taking the time to be on the show. If you're an ordinary mom or know someone who could benefit from listening to this podcast, do share it with them. This podcast was recorded at Manic Pod Studios in Chembur, Mumbai. Our sound engineer is Shrey Tiwari and our producer is Vedant Nayak. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gayatri.